The fog rolls in from Halifax Harbor long before the city goes to sleep. It creeps across the old dockyard, wraps itself around stone walls, and settles among buildings that have watched more than 2 centuries of triumph, tragedy, war, and loss. And among those buildings stands one of the oldest and most intriguing structures in the city. It's not a Victorian mansion abandoned to decay or a crumbling ruin swallowed by the woods. This is a place that still stands proudly, still serves a purpose, and still carries stories that refuse to fade. Some are documented in military records. Others survive only in whispers. And a few, according to those who have worked there, may belong to people who never truly left.
At the time of the Halifax explosion, a groundskeeper's wife, Mary, and their son Gordon, who was an infant, were living on the 3rd floor of the house. And when the ship exploded, they were unfortunately standing by the window. It blew in on them and they died instantly. Very sad. Mary was only 25. The son Gordon was only just almost a year. And so it was quite a sad loss. And apparently Mary and Gordon are still there on the 3rd floor where they passed away.
I'm Nadine Bailey, and this is Haunted Canada. Today, I'm joined by Jennifer Gamble, curator of the Naval Museum in Halifax, as she takes us inside one of Atlantic Canada's most haunted buildings. This is Admiralty House. Before Canada was a country, there was Halifax. And before Halifax was a city, it was a military installation. Planted on the eastern edge of the continent, in 1749, the British founded it as a naval stronghold, a base from which to project power and to control Atlantic trade routes. But long before any of that, this land belonged to the Mi'kmaq people. They had lived here for thousands of years along the shores they called Jibuktuk, the Great Harbor. They knew these tides and they knew these inlets. The way the fog came in from the open Atlantic in the morning, and the ice moved in the Narrows in February. The British built their fortress upon their land in 1759. Within decades, it had grown into one of the most strategically vital naval stations in the entire Atlantic region. Ships launched from Halifax blockaded American ports during the Revolution, and they ferried troops across oceans during the Napoleonic Wars. They escorted merchant convoys through ice, storms, and enemy fire. Halifax was not some colonial backwater. It was the nerve center of a growing empire. As such, it needed a proper home for the man in charge, Admiral David Milne. Admiral David Milne was born in May 1763 in Musselburgh, Mithalonia, Scotland, to Susan Venner and David Milne, an Edinburgh merchant. He entered the Royal Navy in 1779 at the age of 16 as a midshipman and spent the next 40 years fighting across almost every ocean on Earth. He saw action in the Caribbean during the American War of Independence, served in the East Indies, and defeated a French division of Puerto Rico. He captured Dutch colonies in South America, lost his ship in Santo Domingo, and then turned right around and captured a French frigate off the coast of Africa. He bombarded Algiers, was decorated by the Dutch king, and was nominated a knight by the Kingdom of Naples. By the time he was appointed to command the North American station Halifax in 1816, David Milne was one of the most battle-tested admirals in the Royal Navy. And yet, for 3 years, he lived on his flagship in the Halifax harbor. Before that, the admiral and his family had been packed into a corner of the naval hospital, and neither arrangement was considered appropriate for a man of his rank, his responsibilities, or his guests. Jennifer Gamble, curator of the Naval Museum of Halifax, said that the admiral was waiting for his home to be finished.
Admiralty House, which is situated right in the middle of a naval base called HMCS Stadacona in Halifax, which is just adjacent to the Halifax dockyard, was built between 1814 to 1819. It's this big, beautiful Georgian-style home that was built to be the home of a Royal Navy Commander-in-Chief of the North American Station. It actually turned out that Admiralty House here in Halifax was his summer residence, and then for the winter, the Navy would pack up and they go to Bermuda, which, no fault to them, I understand that. If you've ever lived in maritime Canada, the winters are not so great. But that aside, once the house was built, it took 4 years to build, which is a story in itself. But it's a beautiful stone-based house made of brick and mortar. It's 4 levels, 14,000 square feet. So it's quite a beautiful, large, lavish house. And where it's actually situated, at the time when it was completed in 1819, it was on the top of a hill that overlooked the Halifax dockyard and the majority of downtown Halifax, from the north end looking down to the south end to the open ocean. So Admiralty House commanded one of the primary spots in the view of Halifax. Wherever you were in Halifax, you probably could see Admiralty House. It had a view of the entire harbor.
As Jennifer said, construction began in 1814, and it took 5 years to complete, not because of carelessness, but because of the opposite. The stone foundation was laid deep, and the walls were made of thick brick and mortar for the main floor all the way to the roofline at the time when most buildings in Halifax were still timber. The commissioner overseeing the building understood something important. The house was meant to be permanent. It also was meant as a message, one that could be seen from the harbor. And it said, the British Navy was here and did not intend to leave. Admiral David Milne finally walked through the doors of Admiralty House in 1819, but he didn't stay long. He returned to Britain that same year and went on to serve as Commander-in-Chief at Plymouth, became Vice Admiral, then Full Admiral. He died at sea in 1845, returning to Scotland after more than 60 years of service. He was buried in Inverness, in the church outside of Edinburgh, Scotland. But his name is connected to Halifax as the first of over 30 admirals to call Admiralty House home.
And in the course of that 200 years, we've had famous Royal Navy admirals such as George Cockburn live at the house. He is famous for not only escorting Napoleon into exile after the Napoleonic Wars, he also was involved in the War of 1812 and going down to DC and when the British took the White House. And so we've got famous admirals like that have been Commander-in-Chief that have lived in the house. Sir Francis Austen, famed brother of Jane Austen, lived in Admiralty House when he served as Commander-in-Chief. He was in Halifax for 4 years. He had his wife and his daughters with him when they were in Halifax, so very famous residents. A little more contemporary, during the Second World War, Frederick Banting, known best with Banting and Best, they created insulin. So during the Second World War, he joined the Royal Canadian Navy Volunteer Reserve and was a medical officer, and he stayed in our house. And so we have all these famous people that lived in Admiralty House over the years.
Their names and portraits hang in the home's formal rooms. The postings are documented in the Naval Archives, but the house was never just for admirals. It was filled with the people who made their world possible: servants, groundskeepers, cooks, ladies' maids, and maintenance staff who moved through the back corridors and their staircases, keeping the household running daily. People whose names were rarely written down, whose lives were considered unremarkable by the standards of the time, but who are, as it turns out, the ones who have remained within its walls. Imagine the scene. Horse-drawn carriages crunching across the drive, uniformed officers arriving for dinners lit by candlelight, the sound of naval bands drifting across the harbor. Inside these walls, decisions were made that affected fleets operating across an entire ocean. Mary Gray is a servant in the home, and what happened to her has been passed down by former staff.
Back in the 1860s, Mary Gray was working at Admiralty House. She unfortunately, in the morning in October, she was busy running around doing her job, and she was carrying a bucket of water from one of the top levels of the house down to the basement level where the kitchens were, and she slipped and fell down the stairs, and unfortunately she died when she landed at the bottom of the stairwell. There's a bit of discrepancy between the date of her death and when she was buried, so I'm not sure if she passed away immediately. Maybe she suffered some significant injury, but she did pass away from that accident. And she is buried on the base in our Royal Navy burial ground, which is closer to the dockyard end of the base.
Mary Gray's final resting place is close enough to see the house she used to work in. Her gravestone has been worn by over a century and a half of Atlantic storms, and her name might be hard to read, but she's never been forgotten because she's never really left.
When we had a team of mediums walk through the house in 2018, when I first started working at the house, they said that she was the dominant spirit, that she presented often, that she did speak for other spirits in the house, and they told us that was not uncommon. When you're in a location like Admiralty House that has many different entities that have passed away throughout generations, it is not uncommon to have a spirit who will be the leader. And so I thought that was really interesting. I mean, that was my first time I had ever heard that. And every time the mediums that come in to the house, she is consistently presenting herself as one of the entities that will talk to our mediums or to other people who might visit Admiralty House. It is said that she commonly appears on the stairwell where she passed away. She presents herself on the second floor and occasionally on the third floor. It's always interesting when people come to the house. They come because they hear that either Jane Austen connection or the naval history. And then when they're there, they hear about the paranormal stories. And it's funny, I find people very hesitant to bring up that they've had experiences with paranormal entities before us. But the minute we bring it up, they'll be like, okay, I did see something, and so we always like collecting stories and hearing what other people have to say when they're in the house.
That's because Mary isn't the only spirit people claim to have encountered.
We have other spirits in the house, along with Mary. We have a guard who guards our front door. He occasionally will push the front door open if it's not closed all the way, ring the little bell at the top of the door. The door's been closed completely, and I've been talking to visitors in the lobby, and the bell will go off. It's like a scene out of A Christmas Carol when the bell goes off in Scrooge's room. And it's very kind of, okay, your brain tries to justify it by saying it's the wind, but it has happened a couple of times. And every time we've had a medium or someone who's sensitive to paranormal spirits, they all say the same thing. They come in the house, they stop at the front door, and they say, you have a spirit that is right here, and he's putting his hand out to us saying, please be aware, you're coming into a space that's occupied. So we don't know who this person is who guards the front door, but whoever he is, he's obviously there to protect whoever else is with him in the house. So that always makes us feel good that there's always someone there, someone who's watching.
Then there are the children of the Lowe family. The groundskeeper and his wife moved into the house in the early 1880s to keep the fires burning while the admirals spent their winter in Bermuda. They had 4 children: William, age 6, Alice, age 4, Samuel, age 3, and baby Albert, aged 18 months. They seemed content until the end of 1884, when in just over 6 days, tragedy would claim them all.
Over the course of Christmas, they lost all 4 of their children to diphtheria. It's very sad. They range from the ages 8 to 18 months. Unfortunately, very common for the time. As we know, during that time, disease was what it was. If it wasn't diphtheria, cholera, yellow fever, other things were always floating around. Being a port town, it was very common for a lot of this stuff to come in on ships and to be in Halifax. So unfortunately, we have a lot of documented deaths that are connected to illnesses that were brought to Halifax, such as cholera, specifically in yellow fever. But the Lowe family, they passed away from diphtheria, and it was quite sad. In fact, when in 1904, when the house closed and was being sold, Mrs. Lowe was still working at the house. And she said she was very sad to go in a newspaper interview because she said her children, that's where they were. So she was very aware that the children were still there. They are buried in our burial ground, where Mary Gray is buried as well, and there is a grave marker to the Lowe children.
She had to leave them there because the house was sold, her employment ended, and the world moved on, indifferent to her grief. But the children stayed behind.
They are Alice and Samuel, occasionally William. They are very playful. People will hear children laughing. They like to flicker lights. We had one student one year who actually engaged with Samuel and had talked to him. So the experiences vary, but from what we tell, the children are not trapped. They're there by choice. It is their home, and that's how they identify it. And so they do present quite often because from what I've been told from the museums, they're very curious. So they're always interested when new people walk in the house, or anytime we change an exhibit or do any work in the museum, lights will flicker or things will happen. You'll hear doors slam and no one's upstairs. So it's very interesting just how the mischievous behavior comes out at certain times of the year in the house or when things are happening.
Mediums and investigators have discovered 12 distinct spirits in the house that has been in continuous use for over 200 years.
I will say none of them are malicious. There are 12 spirits that present themselves at Admiralty House. They are all there by choice. None of them have any demonic nature to them. So we're not a classic haunted house where, people come and have very scary or unnerving experiences. No one's ever reported that at Admiralty House. The reports we get is that they are there, they're present. They might seem a bit ominous because of either the way that they died or their stories are a bit sad, but nothing's very threatening. So I always take that away when I talk about the paranormal stories, that they're there by choice, because you never want anyone to be trapped. I got to work there every day, so I'm very glad no one's there not by choice.
The spirits being there by choice is a phrase that stays with you when you learn how some of them died, because one event in particular seems to cast a long shadow over the building. Because the story of Admiralty House cannot be told without fully understanding the horror of the Halifax explosion. That's because it is not merely a historical event that happened nearby. It was a catastrophe that transformed the lives of everyone in the city. On the morning of December 6, 1917, Halifax was already awake. The city was a crucial wartime port during the First World War. Merchant ships, naval vessels, and cargo carriers crowded the harbor every day. Longshoremen worked the docks. Children walked to school. Families prepared breakfasts. Ferry passengers crossed the harbor as they had done countless times before. Just after 8:45 a.m., two ships approached one another in the narrow channel known as the Narrows. One was the Norwegian vessel Emu, traveling outbound from Halifax. The other was the French cargo ship Mont Blanc, which was loaded with the largest explosive cargo ever assembled on a single vessel. At approximately 8:45 a.m., the vessels collided, and at first, the impact was relatively minor, but sparks ignited benzoil that had spilled onto the deck of the Mont Blanc, and in moments, flames spread across the ship. Crew members immediately understood the danger and abandoned the vessel. They rowed desperately toward shore, warning anyone who would listen that the ship was loaded with explosives. Many people did not understand what they meant or simply could not believe a disaster was possible. Instead of running away, hundreds of Halifax residents moved closer. Office employees crowded windows. Children pointed towards the burning vessel as the fire intensified. For nearly 20 minutes, the city watched as black smoke darkened the sky. Then, just after 9 a.m., the world appeared to end. The explosion was so powerful that for a fraction of a second, it created a fireball hotter than the surface of the sun, along with a blinding flash. Witness described seeing an enormous white light before being hurled through the air because of the shockwave expanding outward at an incredible speed. Buildings closest to the harbor simply disintegrated. Wooden homes exploded into splinters. Factories collapsed. Railway yards vanished beneath clouds of debris as entire streets ceased to exist. The force was unimaginable and remains the largest man-made explosion in history prior to the nuclear age. Over 1,900 people were killed. Thousands more were blinded by shattering glass. Entire neighborhoods were leveled in seconds. Admiralty House sat almost directly in the path of the blast. The roof blew off and every window shattered inward. On the third floor, a young woman was standing at the window with her baby in her arms.
At the time of the Halifax explosion, a groundskeeper's wife, Mary, and their son Gordon, who was an infant, were living on the third floor of the house. And when the ship exploded, they were unfortunately standing by the window. It blew in on them and they died instantly. Very sad. Mary was only 25. The son Gordon was only just almost a year. And so it was quite a sad loss. And apparently Mary and Gordon are still there on the third floor where they passed away. What we've been told by the medium, Mary remains because Gordon is there. So she stays to stay with Gordon. I asked, is it possible that they can pass on? And the mediums have told me she hasn't presented any desire to pass on. And until that time comes, they just let her be. And she's happy to be there.
Joining Mary and Gordon is J.F. Armitage.
He was actually working at the far end of the dockyard. And when the Mont Blanc exploded, his body was blown from the dockyard all the way to the other side of the house, which we're talking like about 1 kilometer. So this guy's body went from the dockyard, landed on the opposite side of the house, all burnt and charred. And when they picked up his body and put it, so when it was a hospital, the basement level of the museum was used as a morgue. It's because it had a series of cold storage rooms in the front of the house that they used for that. And so his body was brought into the house and kept there for several days until it was identified. He was one of 17 bodies brought to the house post-Halifax explosion. His name was J.F. Armitage. So he was working on a ship called the SS Cologne, and they were loading horses to go off to Europe during the First World War. Out of the 17 bodies that were brought to Admiralty House, Mr. Armitage was the only one that was properly identified. He was wearing a signet ring on his pinky, and it was through that signet ring that they were able to identify his body and who he was. So I found that really interesting. Out of all the people that were brought to the house, he was the only one that was able to be identified. The rest went to the mass grave where most of the Halifax explosion victims went to. And so apparently Mr. Armitage is still there in the museum. Children see him more often than not. He kind of hangs out the door of where the morgue was and waves at children. He's wearing a white shirt with black pants. His face is not very clear. It's kind of fuzzed over. That's the best description that we've gotten. And again, he's just very curious. He's wondering what's going on. Again, there by choice. Really only children that see him. The mediums know he's there, but it's only children that have physically seen him. So I find that really interesting because I've never heard an adult say that they've seen Mr. Armitage, but children, they'll say, you have a man in the basement watching us.
Then there is the ghost cat, which has been part of Admiralty House for longer than anyone working there can remember.
About a year into working at the museum, the paranormal investigators had already been through once or twice, and we've heard all the stories. And they did mention they saw the cat, and I said, okay, that's great. One night I was in the basement of the museum, turning off lights, locking up the museum for the evening. And as I turned out of one of our main exhibits, which features submarine history, I turned the light off, and then all of a sudden this little orange and white cat ran through my legs up the stairs. So there's this moment where I'm like, there's a cat in the museum. And then I said, no, wait, Jennifer, there's no cat. I'm like, you got to be tired. It's the end of the day. It's been a long day. I'm like, okay, I'm tired. Turn off the lights. I went home. So a couple days passed. And just as a joke, I was saying to my archivist, I said, you know what I saw a couple days ago? I saw the cat. I saw the ghost cat. It ran between my legs up the stairs. And my archivist just looked at me and I said, what's wrong? And she said, you will not believe what I just found doing some filing in the archive. She comes back, and it's a news article from the 1920s talking about a party at Admiralty House. And because it was October, they said, don't forget to ask about the ghosts, and especially the ghost cat. So in 1920, people were reporting the sighting of a ghost cat at Admiralty House and making very light of it, but definitely noting it was there. So, it kind of gave me a chill, and I was like, okay. And so a couple of weeks later, when our mediums came back to the house, and I said to them, I said, okay, so there's a ghost cat. I'm like, can you describe what the cat looks like to me? And without skipping a beat, they said it's orange and white, and it's usually quite scared. And if you see it, it's very quick because it's running away. And so I'm just sitting there, the archivist with her article, the mediums with their story and my story. And I just kind of said, you know what, guys, I had my first paranormal experience in the house and I had to tell them about it. So my first experience actually was the cat and not a person. So I always love telling people that story.
That is what Admiralty House does to people. It turns skeptics into believers. Slowly, through the accumulation of things that cannot be easily explained.
I didn't grow up in the Maritimes, so I didn't grow up in a very big culture that was had a lot of paranormal stories and experiences. Maritime Canada is very paranormal active, which I found out when I started working on the East Coast and eventually living here. I was very skeptical. I was like, nah, that stuff's not real. There's no way. But as the years have rolled on, stories have lined up. Almost like evidence has lined up, and it's getting harder and harder to say, yeah, no. And now I'm like, okay, yeah, something's different, and it's very possible that they are in the house. So it's definitely a very interesting experience. But what I take from it as curator of the museum is that because of these paranormal experiences, we now know about these people who would have remained nameless in our history books. People such as the groundskeeper's family, people such as Mary and Gordon Zwicker, who died in the explosion, even Mary, the servant herself. These are real people with real lived experiences that shape the history of the house, of the Navy, and of our maritime community. And so I take pride in being able to tell people about them now because their stories, their life will continue on.
Jennifer says that the house will be closing soon. Not permanently, just for restoration. It's going to be 2 years of major work that a 200-year-old building demanded. Jennifer made the decision to tell the spirits.
It could sound silly to some people, but I've made a point to walk through the house to say, please understand we're coming back. Our intention is to return. The house will always be occupied. They will always have a place. And so it's not the first time they've experienced the house being closed and change in operation. So it's just part of the history of the house. And so hopefully they know that we're coming back and that their memories are still going to be preserved. So we've taken some time to just kind of put that out there.
The Naval Museum of Halifax is expected to reopen in May of 2028. When it does, they will offer an audio tour that will include paranormal stories as visitors go room by room. After all, Admiralty House has witnessed imperial ambition, wartime suffering, natural aging, and one of Canada's greatest disasters. It would almost be strange if people didn't feel those who still linger there. The mind recognizes age. It senses accumulated memory. A room occupied continuously for 2 centuries feels different from a modern office tower. But at Admiralty House, that sensation is amplified by the weight of being one of the oldest surviving buildings associated with Halifax's military and maritime heritage. A physical connection to an era when the city stood at the center of Atlantic naval power. Those lucky enough to have visited were able to walk through rooms once occupied by admirals. Many left having experienced nothing unusual at all, but others have felt a strange feeling on the staircase, a fleeting figure in a window, or a swish of a tail between their legs. Whether those experiences are paranormal or simply the result of standing in a place saturated with history remains a matter of belief. As the fog thickens outside and darkness settles over Halifax Harbor, Admiralty House remains exactly where it stood since the age of sail. Silent, watchful, holding its secrets. And, if its stories are true, a few of its former residents are there as well. Thank you for joining me as we explored Admiralty House in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And a special thank you to Jennifer Gamble for taking the time to talk with me. I really do appreciate it. If you want to visit Admiralty House, I will link their website in the show notes. Do you have a ghost story, paranormal encounter, or a true crime? If yes, email it to me so that I can cover it and share with the listeners on this podcast. Email me through the website hauntedcanada.com. If this episode gave you the chills in the best possible way, please consider supporting this show by buying me a coffee. The link is in the show notes. Every coffee helps keep these stories coming, and if you want to go even deeper, stay tuned. I'll be adding a Patreon very soon. Haunted Canada is sponsored by the Eminent Ghost Tours. I will link the website in the show notes. Haunted Canada is written and produced by me, Nadine Bailey, with senior producer Dila Velasquez. Production and sound design is by Rob Johnston, with help from Corey Price. If you would like to support this podcast, please follow, share, and tell a friend about this podcast. We'd also appreciate a like and a 5-star written review. If you're on Spotify, tap follow. That helps more people find these Canadian ghost stories. Also, you can follow me on our different social media platforms, including TikTok and my YouTube channel, Haunted Canada. Hey everyone, got some exciting news. I'll be hosting a haunted and paranormal tour of Ireland in May of 2027 in partnership with my friend Joanne at Expedia. We'll be visiting haunted locations, staying in haunted castles, and exploring many historical places, all while delving into ghosts, hauntings, and paranormal activity. So be sure to bring your EMF readers with you. All the information is posted on the website, hauntedcanada.com. And remember, space is limited, so book early. Thank you from all of us at Haunted Canada and Curious Cast. Have a good night, everyone, and stay haunted.